Hi there, my name is Trolls and welcome to Soundpaint. In this tutorial, we are going to go deep into our rack system. One of the core concepts in Soundpaint is that you can truly design your own custom engine experience. You can customize the engine any way you want with just a few mouse clicks. So let's say, for example, that I have a specific set of preferences that I like for my instruments. You can see right now I've opened a bunch of racks. You can drag and drop them in any order you want and really customize your own design. But you don't need to use racks. More than often, I find myself just making instruments really quick. So let me show you how that's done. For example, click up here on the X. We have a whole clean slate on the user interface right now. The engine is empty. I'm just going to take a piano down here and drop it into one of our parts. And now I have a fully playable piano. So whether you want to use racks or not, the choice is yours. I remember back when I was designing Soundpaint and doing all the layouts for it, I was fascinated with both Android phones and with iPhones. I still am. I love Androids because I can customize them, but I love iPhones because they have such a beautiful, singular, simple, gorgeous design. And in Soundpaint, I wanted to offer both. So you don't have to use racks, but you can, and in this video we will. So I'll see you inside of the DAW. The rack system is where your control begins. For example, here, if you just want lightning fast access to the most common effects, for example, reverb, just click here and you're good to go. Or maybe you want an old BBD tape delay. Or perhaps control the ADSR of your instrument. ADSR means attack, decay, sustain, and release. And it's essentially a description of what happens through the stages of a sound. So imagine you click a piano key, for example, the initial part, that sort of thunk, would be the attack. And as the sound fades out, as you hold down the key, it sort of decays, it becomes a matter of sustains, and then eventually release as well. ADSR lets you control these parameters. The numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 corresponds with the different parts up here. As you may know, you have your program up here and a program is made from parts. In this case, we have 2 parts, which would correspond with part 1 here and part 2. You can see part 2 has a longer release and we'll get back to that. But for now, let me just try to play what we got here. We have the 1928 grand piano and over here we have beautiful noises. And in this particular case, really beautiful, windy, rainy kind of sound, very moody. Okay, so in that example, the rain was coming in a little bit too fast in my opinion. I would sort of like to fade in the rain. That means here, I'm gonna go to part 2. You can see that corresponds with the part up here and move the attack up here. You'll notice here that it sets it in milliseconds up to full seconds. And I'm gonna take my time here. The rain is gonna come in over like 4 seconds. So when I hold down the keys, the rain is gradually gonna fade in. I'm also gonna increase the release here, meaning that once I let go of the key, the rain is still gonna sustain. Let's see what that sounds like. The master rack offers you fundamental controls over your entire instrument. It can be volume, it can be pan. Tone is a little bit like a tone knob on a guitar. If you pull it down here, you're gonna get a more dark sound, and if you pull it up here, you're gonna get a brighter sound of your instrument. It's just a really quick way of sort of giving character to your instrument. You can also control the pitch down here. You can go up, for example, or you can go really deep. The offset rack lets you control the offset of all 4 parts. Again, you'll see the numbers here corresponding with the parts up here. In this case, we have a drum here. Let me just play a snare drum without offset and then activate the offset here. You can hear that initial hit sort of gets cut off of the snare as we go further into the waveform or sort of forward in time on it. Let me show you another example of offset here using a vocal phrase. Let me play it first here without any offset. And now let me play the same thing again here, the phrase, but this time I'm going to activate the offset so you can hear how I'm sort of going deeper into the waveform. All right, so let's say I want that ma'achar kind of aspect of the phrase. I'm just going to take offset here and then dial it in with detail real quick. Let's say I really like that phrase. There's a cool trick in Soundpaint here. Go up to sound mode up here, click, and take what's called one note stretch. I'm going to click the very phrase again here, and now this phrase with all its offset stuff here is all over my keyboard, spread tonally so it's fully playable. You can also reverse from the offset module by clicking down here. That would be equivalent of clicking up here in our sound mode and choosing our reverse option. They're doing the same thing, but you can access them from two different points. The touch module down here relates to things that you are physically touching. For example, your keyboard controller. Up here, you'll see that it says PB, that stands for pitch bender. And you can set the values of your pitch bender here. This would be down and this would be up on your pitch bender. Some instruments like guitars benefit from a more subtle pitch bender, whereas other things like keyboards can have more dramatic effects when you do it. But let me just give you an example here, combining our zither with our guitarlili. This becomes sort of a beautiful abstract guitar-like instrument with a notion of bass in it too. Or an old, ultra deep sampled vintage keyboard here, benefiting from a little more dramatic pitch bender. You can also activate our monoglide, aka portamento. This is really useful for old school synthesizers where you want that monophonic, very solo friendly kind of thing. It works in all instruments, but particularly useful in synthesizers. You can also control the time of glide by moving the glide time here. Let me just play the same phrase repeatedly and then move the slider up here. You'll see what happens. It sort of gets longer and longer the further up we go. Down here is your velocity type. This lets you set the velocity or the pressure sensitivity on your keyboard. Sometimes you want something really expressive with a very, very delicate velocity, and sometimes you want it a little bit hotter. Let me play the same piano piece here with the same pressure on the keys, but I'll adjust the velocities in real time so you can hear how different they are. So I'm playing the same thing here, but you can hear how the dynamic switches when I choose different options here. But we also have another velocity type. If you see here down in the bottom, you can lock a velocity to a given number. Let me show you right now a synthesizer placed with a sort of mid-tempered velocity, so things are still expressive. You can hear that dynamic expression like da 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 da. But let's go down here and lock it to 127. The sound and dynamic is firm, locked at the hardest velocity possible. Voicing relates to the pitch of your instrument and how many voices it can play. Pitch up here lets you control the semitones of your instrument. Micropitch down here lets you control your instrument, but in a much smaller scale, just within like a semitone. And down here you got max voices. The max voices sets how many voices you can trigger at the same time. You want to be a little bit careful with this one because for each voice you add, it adds a little bit of a fraction to the CPU core. But we recommend around 64 voices for more advanced instruments like pianos and such. You'll also find LFOs or low frequency oscillators under racks. LFOs let you create things like vibrato for an instrument. So let's for example say that we have this beautiful synthesizer here and I want to create some vibrato for it using an LFO. Okay, so that's the synth in its core state. But let's say we want to create vibrato. Vibrato is commonly done by creating variation in the pitch. So in this case here, I'll go up here to the micro pitch and I'll right click it and you'll see get a couple of different options. I'm going to choose Add LFO Automation. You're going to see this page here. I'll cover that more in our matrix page, but essentially this page here belongs to our modulation matrix, so we can see what I just did in here, but we have a whole other video covering the matrix. For now, I just want to show you what you can do. Again, we right clicked and we chose Add LFO Automation, and you can see that it's going here. And because we picked Add LFO Automation, you'll see that corresponding in the module here. So if I move this slider here, you'll see that the pitch gets more subtle. Let me play that in the synth so you can hear what it sounds like. All right, that's cool. But let's say that I don't want the vibrato all the time. In fact, I totally want to control the amount of the vibrato on my mod wheel. I'll go down here to amount. If you remember here that it makes it more subtle over here in the micro pitch. I'm going to right click on it and choose MIDI CC Automation. I'm going to move my mod wheel and now you can see it's moving down here when I'm moving my mod wheel. So now I have full control over vibrato. The notion of right-clicking goes for virtually all parameters inside of the engine here. You can really control on any parameter you see and associate it to LFOs or controllers or whatever you want. And it all gets recorded here in the mod matrix where you can also see all the different things from. You can also do adjustments in here and so forth. But as I mentioned, we have a different video covering both the effects section, another one for ARP and another one for the mod matrix. So if you really want to go deep into that, watch those videos and earn your doctor's degree in Soundpaint. And there you have it. This is what racks are for. You have 14 racks in total. You have 7 here on the first page. We also have rack B here, which is identical to rack A, but it simply offers you 7 more slots if you really want to go cray-cray on your instrument design. But reality is that you don't really have to. I more than often just go up here, start from scratch, click my parts here, and just start examining different instruments, put them together, morph them together. Let me just make a couple here real quick. I'll make sure I'm in parts mode here. Let me type in 1928. And go down here and just grab a sustain, for example. Now we have a playable piano. Let me add a little bit of reverb to that, perhaps like an old plate emulation. All right, let's try something totally wild. I'm gonna type in Thailand and grab some sound effects from Thailand. I'm not sure which ones yet, but I'll just click a couple of keys until I find something I like. Just gonna mute the piano here for a second.
End of the walkway.
And let's say I'm going to take that specific sample and make sure it's all over the keyboard just like the piano. I'm going to click here on this icon and get into sound mode and then go down here to one note stretch and click on it. I'm going to click the key I want to isolate and spread over my entire keyboard and we're done. You can just click out here. Now this phrase here is fully playable across the keyboard. And then just simply activate the piano here and click the morph button. You'll see right now that we're clicking from left to right, meaning that the piano is dominating the sound. That's probably best. That means that this sort of talk here has to conform to the piano. It's cool, you can hear how this sort of metallic character of the piano is carried into the voice, and yet it still sounds like somewhat like a piano. Let me just play a little more with it here. And there you have it. Soundpaint is your engine. You create whatever engine you want, and as time goes by, you're going to figure out what preference works best for you, racks, no racks, effects, and so forth. But as you can see, you can really build instruments out of your imagination without any of that. Just load some things, smash them together, and see what happens. And while you do that, we're going to keep expanding on the free engine with new racks and features, but always with one thing in mind, and that's simplicity. Take care for now, and see you in the next one.